All right, what's up, everybody? Happy Friday. It has been another week around the sun, which means it is time once again for Kingdom on the Road. We are jumping back into our walk through the Old Testament. We are in Judges currently. We left off last time with the story of Samson, and so now we are picking up from there. But before we get into all of that, just a couple of things right at the top. If you are new to the show, the way this works is we're walking our way through the entirety of the Old Testament, where we are going through, and our goal is to demystify the Old Testament, to be able to equip folks to be able to work their way through basically two-thirds of the scriptures well. And along the way, we're going to be reading a chapter, stopping, talking about it, the whole nine yards. And so inevitably, we're going to hit on the things that stand out to us, the high points, all of that sort of jazz. But inevitably, we may miss some things. That is where you come in. So, as you are watching, do us a favor, navigate your way to the comment section of wherever it is that you are tuning in from. Say good morning. Let us know where you are tuning in from. But also, as we go through these different chapters, as we hit these different things, ask your questions, because we cannot hit everything, and it gives us an idea of what we should dig into, where we should pump the brakes, all of that sort of jazz. And remember, as we like to say, that if you have the question, that means there is a very good chance that somebody else has the question also. So do everybody the favor and go ahead and ask. So, with that, we are in Judges 17. We are reading out of the NLT. Generally speaking, the NLT does a very good job of serving as more of a story narrative sort of approach, and we are firmly in a section of scripture where that is very beneficial. So, with that, we are going to jump into the text, Judges chapter 17. There was a man named Micah, who lived in the hill country of Ephraim. One day he said to his mother, "I heard you place a curse on the person who stole 1,100 pieces of silver from you. Well, I have the money. I was the one who took it." "The Lord bless you for admitting it," his mother replied. He returned the money to her, and she said, "I now dedicate these silver coins to the Lord. In honor of my son, I will have an image carved and an idol cast." So when he returned the money to his mother, she took 200 silver coins and gave them to a silversmith who made them into an image and an idol, and these were placed in Micah's house. Micah set up a shrine for the idol, and he made a sacred ephod and some household idols. Then he installed one of his sons as his personal priest. In those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. One day, a young Levite who had been living in Bethlehem in Judah arrived in that area. He had left Bethlehem in search of another place to live, and as he traveled, he came to the hill country of Ephraim. He happened to stop at Micah's house as he was traveling through. "Where are you from?" Micah asked him. He replied, "I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah. I am looking for a place to live." "Stay here with me," Micah said, "and you can be a father and priest to me. I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, plus a change of clothes and your food." The Levite agreed to this, And the young man became like one of Micah's sons. So Micah installed the Levite as his personal priest, and he lived in Micah's house. I know the Lord will bless me now, Micah said, because I have a Levite serving as my priest. I think one of the things, and we talk about this, in different ways, in different forms, as we go through the chapters. But I think one of the things that can serve as a stumbling block if you're not expecting it, but once you are expecting it, provides a fascinating structure that to be reading these stories, is the fact that like this thing happens over here, right?
Right.
And
And
then
then zero.
zero contextualization, zero connective tissue. Like literally, we're not getting like, oh, and then pan the camera over here. Nope, we're just like, this is a thing, and this happened, and now we got this dude and this Levitic priest, and then you know what I mean. Like it's all very like it is very much a collection of stories and a collection of situations that are all happening throughout the entirety of this time, which is exactly what the book is. That's what it's intended to be. But I think it's just interesting when it very blatantly comes out like this.
Yeah, even just looking, like you said, following through the beats. It's like, you know, unless you understand what we've been reading beforehand, there are people that are showing up here that you're like, well, who's a Levite? What does that mean? They're talking about ephods and, and just all this kind of stuff. And it's like you have to have a handle on the full journey that we've been processing through, to even have any reference points for this. Um, and there's a lot of things here. So when you look at this, I don't know if people are reading this. You have the little subtitles there, in your Bible. It says, "Oh, Micah's, idolatry," right? That kind of thing. And you're like, okay, what does that mean? Well, you see here in this, number one, there's this theft. We don't, again, like you said, it just shows up out of nowhere. You know, steals these coins. But then number two, you know, in order to appease or make himself right, he goes and he creates his own shrine, his own altar, and then anoints his own priest. I mean, it's just a lot of stuff going on here that if you don't have any background reference, you're totally lost. You're like, why is this happening? you know, what is he doing?
Yeah.
And is this okay? Is this not okay? And so, yeah, I agree with you. You just kind of drop in on this scene. It's like watching watching a show, and you come in on the middle of the show. You're like,
Yeah.
so what's going on right now? So I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you look at Micah's actions, right, it seems like he's trying to make himself right with God,
Yeah.
but is doing literally all of the wrong things. And it
Right.
says in there that, they don't have a king right now. And so we don't know, or they're doing whatever seems right to them, sort of thing. So they are setting the stage that there is an air of, I guess, for lack of a better term, lawlessness that's taking place in all of this. That it's kind of a free for all sort of thing. And it's interesting that you pull out from this the idea that, like, again, there's nothing new under the sun. We've said this before, that one of the most powerful aspects of the Old Testament is that it showcases the fact that humanity has been humanity for a very long time. That there's that these situations and circumstances that we see here and now and today are not by any stretch of the imagination new. And it's one of those awkward conversations, right? Because I, for one, and I'll speak solely for myself when I say what I'm about to say, I try very hard to not give people a hard time for bad theological takes, because who knows when it's going to come around and it's going to be my turn to need to be set straight on something. And was that always the case? Absolutely not. I've tried to come around over the years to try and not to try to throw my hands up when it's not theology prime and say, you know what? Okay, the Bible is situated in a way where there's a lot of things that can be interpreted different ways at different times and different things like that. That being said, there are situations and there are times where you look at it and you're like, that's not what that means, or that's a practice taken out of context from a different group and brought into Christianity, or this is a practice from Christianity that you're taking out so that way you can put it into another situation and call it God flavored. And that's where I look a lot more. So the term, for those of you that don't know, that would describe both Ant and I, is we are classical theists. That's a general categorization that we would both get stuck into. It means even though we have certain perspectives, certain opinions, different things like that, um, our theology prime category is pretty straight down the middle. You're not going to really find anything that's real out of pocket when it comes to that. And why do I bring all of this up? Well, what do we see here? We are seeing some of the very things that roll the clock back, right? Like we saw in Exodus, in the giving of the law, in all of this, like, hey, don't do this. Don't create idols. Don't do all of these things. And that's exactly what dude's doing.
Right.
And so like but there's a weird and almost uh I don't know, perverse sense of comfort, I guess, that humanity has been humanity for a long time, that like the ways in which we mess it up as humans are not new to our generation, and the Bible doesn't shy away from that. Because if you have this giant cosmic linchpin, right, God, Yahweh, you you have to have the continuity of everything else that's moving around Yahweh, right? Because you've got God, he's the constant. Things move around him. Now, don't take some kind of astrological whatever. Like it's a metaphor, y'all. Um, the things the other things are variable. Well, if we're gonna be consistent about the constant, then we have to be consistent about the variable too. And that's exactly what we're seeing here.
Yeah, as I'm looking at it, I'm reading through it again as you're talking, and what you end up seeing is, like you said, he's breaking all the rules. So he's
Mhm.
anointing his own priest, which the priests are supposed to be from the line of Aaron. He's just picking anybody, you know. Um, then he finds a Levite, and he's like, "Yay! At least that person is the descendant of Aaron, because Aaron was a Levite. Aaron and Moses both come from the tribe of Levi, which is, of course, the son of Jacob. One of the 12 tribes." But then you see he makes his own ephod. Now, ephod is that priestly garment that the priest would wear that goes over them, and they would, use that at their time of prayer. They would have the ephod on, so it's basically a garment to go into prayer. So he made his own. Then he creates a shrine to all kinds of idols, and it was like, oh well, let me add Yahweh let me add Yahweh into this conglomeration of things that I'm worshiping. And he's doing all of this to, as you said earlier, to make myself right with God because I did wrong. Now, again, when you talk about theology, And you look at something like this and you say, "Well, what am I supposed to learn from it?" Well, you're supposed to look at this and see what he did and say, "You know what? Do we do that in any way? Is there any way where we feel like we have to appease God, where we've gotta go and, 'Oh, man, I gotta make myself right with God.'" Well, we don't have to do that. We don't have to make ourselves right with God. Jesus made us right with God. So so you don't have to, create anything. You don't have to do anything extra. And again, I'm just stating this. I'm not attacking anybody's belief system. This is just what we're reading here. I'm sticking to it like you said, like you said, Joe. We're pretty much down the middle. I'm just observing what's here. I'm not extending the meaning. I'm not trying to, tag people with it. It's just what we're seeing here. That Micah's, tragic, situation here is that he felt like he needed to make himself right with God because of what he did. And so he went, totally in the wrong direction to do that instead of just, going to God and asking for forgiveness. you know, so this is an interesting passage. It's short, but it's filled with a lot of what do you call those rabbit bunny trails that you could go off into a lot of stuff, if
Yeah.
you don't keep the main thing.
I do think it is interesting. You raised a good point that usually we would see it left at the level of graven images, idols, different things like that. Things that were expressly outside of the parameters of things that would be utilized by the people of God. This is different because this is where we see things utilized, like he makes his own ephod, he does, stuff like that. Like, that's just, it's a different flavor, same concept, like see
Right.
previous statements. Like, this is just an elaborate picture of doing things outside of, what needs to be done and all of that, when it comes to, coming to God, asking forgiveness, the whole 9 yards. But it's it's unique in the sense that it is directly traversing these aspects of the people of God, of worship to Yahweh and things like that, not just doing things that he said don't do. All right, let's go ahead and jump back into the text. Also, if you hear anything in the background, it is in fact the end of the world outside right now. Where I am at, it is raining cats and dogs, as they may say. All right, chapter 18. Now, in those days, Israel had no king, and the tribe of Dan was trying to find a place where they could settle, for they had not yet moved into the land assigned to them when the land was divided among the tribes of Israel. So the men of Dan chose from their clans 5 capable warriors from the towns of Zorah and Eshcol to scout out a land for them to settle in. When these warriors arrived in hill country of Ephraim, they came to Micah's house and spent the night there. While at Micah's house, they recognized the young Levite's accent. So they went over and asked him, "Who brought you here? And what are you doing in this place? Why are you here?" He told them about his agreement with Micah and that he had been hired as Micah's personal priest. Then they said, "Ask God whether or not our journey will be successful. Go in peace." The priest replied, "For the Lord is watching over your journey." So the 5 men went on to the town of Laish, where they noticed the people living carefree lives, like the Sidonians. They were peaceful and secure. The people were also wealthy because their land was very fertile, and they lived a great distance from Sidon and had no allies nearby. When the men returned to Zorah and Eshcol, their relatives asked them, "What did you find?" The men replied, "Come on, let's attack them. We have seen the land. It is very good. What are you waiting for? Don't hesitate to go and take possession of it." When you get there, you will find the people living carefree lives. God has given us a spacious and fertile land, lacking in nothing. So 600 men from the tribe of Dan, armed with weapons of war, set out from Zorah and Eshel. They camped in a place west of Kiriath Jearim in Judah, which is called Mana Mahana Dan to this day. Then they went on from there into the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. The 5 men who had scouted out the land around Laish explained to the others, "These buildings contain a sacred ephod, as well as some household items, a carved image, and a cast idol. What do you think you should do?" Then the 5 men turned off the road and went over to Micah's house, where the young Levite lived, and greeted him kindly. As the 600 armed warriors from the tribe of Dan stood at the entrance of the gate, the 5 scouts entered the shrine and removed the carved image, the sacred ephod, the household idols, and the cast idol. Meanwhile, the priest was standing at the gate with the 600 armed warriors. When the priest saw the men carrying all the sacred objects out of Micah's shrine, he said, "What are you doing?" "Be quiet and come with us," they said. "Be a father and priest to all of us. Isn't it better to be a priest for an entire tribe and clan of Israel than for the household of just one man?" The young priest was quite happy to go with them. So he took along the sacred ephod, the household idols, and the carved image. They turned and started on their way again, placing their children, livestock, and possessions in front of them. When the people from the tribe of Dan were quite a distance from Micah's house, the people who lived near Micah were chasing after them. They were shouting as they caught up with them. The men of Dan turned around and said to Micah, "What's the matter? Why have you called these men together and chased after us like this?" "What do you mean? What's the matter?" "What do you mean, what's the matter?" Micah replied. "You've taken away all the gods I have made, and my priest, and I have nothing left." The men of Dan said, "Watch what you say. There are some short tempered men around here who might get angry and kill you and your family." So the men of Dan continued on their way. When Micah saw that there were too many of them for him to attack, he turned around and went home. Then, with Micah's idols and his priest and the men then, with Micah's idols and priest, the men of Dan came to the town of Laish, whose people were peaceful and secure. They attacked with swords and burned the town to the ground. There was no one to rescue the people, for they lived a great distance from Sidon and had no allies nearby. This happened in the valley near Beth Rahab. Then the people of Dan rebuilt the town and lived there. They renamed the town Dan after their ancestor, Israel's son, but it had originally been called Laish. Then they set up the carved image. They appointed Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Moses, as their priest. This family continued as priests for the tribe of Dan until the exile. So Micah's carved image was worshipped by the tribe of Dan as long as the tabernacle of God remained at Shiloh. Wow. Yeah, that was a lot. So
Right.
it so we look at this and I'm going to be the voice of the audience here for a second. Am I missing something, or are there no good guys when it comes to this? You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand right and wrong, good, bad, all that sort of stuff. that's a tricky spot to that's a tricky layer to hang out at when you're looking at the scriptures. But when you're looking at this story and all of that, it just kind of seems like literally everybody's out of pocket.
Yeah, it's the wild, wild west. It really is. It's like every man for himself, and they said it multiple times, and it's actually not the last time you're gonna hear it, that there were no kings in the land, so the people did what was right in their own eyes. That there's no authority, there's no rule, there's nobody to bring order, so people are just doing, and it's gonna get worse, y'all. Newsflash. It's gonna get even worse than this. It is totally, like you said, everybody's out of pocket. Everybody's doing whatever comes to their mind, whatever they think. They're attacking people. They're running up in people's houses. I mean, this is totally, just go for it. And this is an interesting section. You know, um, it kind of started with Micah, but it's going to go all the way through to the end of this book of Judges. That you're going to see some things, and brace yourself if you're tracking along with us. That the ability for people to be at their worst may come out,
Yeah.
because there is no, in this particular time, there's no rule, there's no law, there's no right, there's no wrong. It's just people doing whatever makes sense to them at the time. And you're going to hear this phrase, remember this phrase, that the people did what was right in their own eyes because there were no kings in the land. All right. Remember that statement because that's going to be a theme throughout the rest of these chapters.
And it's worth mentioning that just because somebody did something doesn't invalidate the last thing that was done. So I'm not always, and oftentimes I'm just straight not a fan of the the headers and the subsections and the section breaks and all of that sort of stuff when you're looking at the scriptures. But for those of you that are, reading along, you'll notice in 17, at least in the NLT, it's Micah's idols is the header for that chapter. And then 18, idolatry in the tribe of Dan. Well, just because the tribe of Dan committed idolatry doesn't mean that Micah, like, it doesn't stop the fact that Micah in and of himself, before any of this kicked off, had idols that he shouldn't have had.
Right.
They were just taken and co-opted by Dan, still doing the same thing though. And notice something. They hadn't taken the land that was theirs. And so they found a different land. Like that's important to note, that things are not happening in the way that they were supposed to be happening in the first place on a lot of levels.
Yeah, in the New King James, it says the Danites adopt Micah's idols. So kind of exactly
Mm.
what you were saying. They just kind of adopted and folded it into what they were doing and continued it on. And yeah, so it's just interesting looking at, you know just the lack of any type of structure. Everybody's just kind of coming up with whatever they can think of. It's almost like we're at a point where they've totally forgotten, you know, w- what the point of all this is, and they're just living life. We'll just put it
Yep.
that way. They're just living. There's 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 no rhyme or reason. They're just living. They're coming up with whatever is important on the fly.
And that's all within a context of rampant atheism would not be a thing at this time. Like
Right.
they lived in a spiritual context that they would have some kind of belief system. And so because of that layer of missing, like, forgetting, missing what the actual point of how they should be living was, well, suddenly then, we are at a point in the history where the idea of Yahweh wasn't completely abandoned or
Right.
forgotten or things like that, but was drafted into the plurality of the different context of the different gods of the pantheon of that sort of thing. And so you just have Yahweh being brought into the fold and treated like a one of many sort of deity.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Um, all right, so let's go ahead and jump into 19. Now, in those days, Israel had no king. Again, like Ann said, this is repetitious for a reason. There was a man from the tribe of Levi living in a remote area in of the hill country of Ephraim. One day he brought home a woman from Bethlehem in Judah to be his concubine. But she became angry with him and returned to her father's home in Bethlehem. After about 4 months, her husband set out for Bethlehem to speak personally to her and persuade her to come back. He took with him a servant and a pair of donkeys. When he arrived at her father's house, her father saw him and welcomed him. Her father urged him to stay a while, so he stayed 3 days, eating, drinking, and sleeping there. On the fourth day, the man was up early, ready to leave. But the woman's father said to his son in law, "Have something to eat before you go." So the two men sat down together and had something to eat and drink. Then the woman's father said, "Please stay another night and enjoy yourself." The man got up to leave, but his father in law kept urging him to stay. So finally he gave in and stayed the night. On the morning of the fifth day, he was up early again, ready to leave. And again, the woman's father said, "Have something to eat. Then you can leave later this afternoon." So they had another day of feasting. Later, as the man and his concubine and servant were preparing to leave, his father in law said, "Look, it's almost evening. Stay the night and enjoy yourself. Tomorrow you can get up early and be on your way." But this time the man was determined to leave. So he took his two saddled donkeys and his concubine and headed in the direction of Jabesh, that is Jerusalem. It was late in the day when when they neared Jabes. And the man's servant said to him, "Let's stop at this Jebusite town and spend the night there." "No," his master said, "we cannot stay in this foreign town where there are no Israelites. Instead, we will go on to Gibeah. Come on, let's try to get as far as Gibeah or Ramah, and we'll spend the night in one of those towns." So they went on. The sun was setting as they came to Gibeah, a town in the land of Benjamin. So they stopped there to spend the night. They rested in the town square, but no one took them in for the night. That evening, an old man came home from his work in the fields. He was from the hill country of Ephraim, but he was living in Gibeah, where the people were from the tribe of Benjamin. When he saw the travelers sitting in the town square, he asked them where they were from and where they were going. We have been in Bethlehem in Judah," the man replied. "We are on our way to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim, which is my home. I traveled to Bethlehem, and now I'm returning home. But no one has taken us in for the night, even though we have everything we need. We have straw and feed for our donkeys, and plenty of bread and wine for ourselves." "You are welcome to stay with me," the old man said. "I will give you anything you might need. But whatever you do, don't spend the night in the square." So he took them home with him and fed the donkeys. After they washed their feet, they ate and drank together. While they were enjoying themselves, a crowd of troublemakers from the town surrounded the house. They began beating at the door and shouting to the old man, "Bring out the man who is staying with you so we can have sex with him." The old man stepped outside to talk to them. "No, my brothers, don't do such an evil thing, for this man is a guest in my house, and such a thing would be shameful. Here, take my virgin daughter and this man's concubine. I will bring them out to you, and you can abuse them and do whatever you like. But don't do such a shameful thing to this man." But they wouldn't listen to him. So the Levite took hold of his concubine and pushed her out the door. The men of the town abused her all night, taking turns raping her until morning. Finally, at dawn, they let her go. At daybreak, the woman returned to the house where her husband was staying. She collapsed at the door of the house and lay there until it was light. When her husband opened the door to leave, there lay his concubine with her hands on the threshold. He said, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. So he put her body on his donkey and took her home. When he got home, he took a knife and cut his concubine's body into 12 pieces. There he sent one then he sent one piece to each tribe throughout all the territory of Israel. Everyone who saw it said, "Such a horrible crime has not been committed in all the time since Israel left Egypt." Think about it. What are we going to do? Who is going to speak up? Well, there you go. Yeah, that what do you like? What do you even like? It's like, okay, chapter 20. You know what I mean? Like so lawlessness has taken over at this point, and that's the idea here. That like literally, um, all hell is breaking loose when it comes to what's actually happening here. And the
The
truth
truth
is,
is,
like,
like,
this
if
is,
it,
for anybody who struggles with this, and I just want to be clear, this is where we talk about, just because the Bible mentions it does not in any way, shape, or form mean that this is what God is condoning
Right.
at all. And the truth is, this is a yes, this is a different time and a different place. However, there are some things that nothing new is under the sun, and we are seeing that left to their own devices. Like, I'm not I've talked at length and at nauseum about the fact that I don't subscribe to total depravity. I think it's sloppy. I think it's messy. I think it's a humanistic explanation to talk about um to talk about what people are capable of. I don't subscribe to total depravity. That's why I tongue in cheek call it scumbag theology and all of that. Um, that being said, that doesn't invalidate what's possible when looking at how people can act and be out of pocket, and how people can do these things that are so horrendous. Um, and so and we have a comment. I think the concubine was already dead before he cut her into pieces. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what we're getting at.
Yes.
Um, later in the text, I think he implies she was already dead. Yeah, I think that's exactly. I think that's exactly what we've got going on here.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a world where you have to um, be present and be aware in the gravity of what is happening here, but again, if the thesis statement here is equipping folks to be able to navigate the scriptures well, I think we have to make sure that we aren't making too many sweeping statements based off of what we're seeing here in the text. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's why I wanted to kind of alert, the readers to, um, there are no kings in the land, so people are doing what's right in their own eyes. And, you know, this is not, as you said, just because the Bible records it doesn't mean that God is supporting it, right? That God is saying, yes, this is what's supposed to happen. The Bible's being honest. It's not hiding the bad parts, the scary parts, because this is why mankind needs redemption. This is why we need a savior, because left to their own devices, this is what they came up with. this is this is how they chose to do things. Um, there is a parallel passage for those that want to go back and look at it in Genesis chapter 19. Very similar types. It's not exactly the same, but there are similar components where people are just doing whatever comes, whatever they think of, whatever comes to their mind. And this is tough to stomach as you're reading through this, as you're trying to and you're saying, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? Well, you're learning from this that if people are left to you know to their own devices, some people, not all people, right, but some people can go to levels that you're you'll struggle to understand, like, what are they doing. I want to point out something that happens in this text, and it's very subtle. It starts off using the word concubine, but later on you'll notice that he says wife and husband, because the
Mm.
word concubine actually, uh, in certain contexts, actually means wife. When we think of concubine, we think of one of many, right? But in this particular context, we are actually talking about a covenant relationship, that this was this was his wife. Wasn't just as the way we normally think. I don't want to say just. It's not the normal way that we think of concubine. And whenever you see that word, you've got to check the context. Context gives us definition. It gives us meaning of what it is that we're looking at. Because if you notice that it kind of switched, started off a concubine, then ended up as wife. Well, in this context, the concubine is a wife. Just uh, just something to think about as you're reading through carefully. But yeah, yeah, a thing happened.
Um, okay, so let's go ahead and keep going. We're gonna hit chapter 20. Um, then all the Israelites were united as one man, from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, including those from across the Jordan in the land of Gilead. The entire community assembled in the presence of the Lord at Mizpah. The leaders of all the people and all the tribes of Israel, 400,000 warriors armed with swords, took their positions in the assembly of the people of God. Word soon reached the land of Benjamin that the other tribes had gone up to Mizpah. The Israelites then asked how this terrible crime had happened. The Levite, the husband of the woman who had been murdered, said, "My concubine and I came to spend the night in Gibeah, a town that belongs to the people of Benjamin. That night, some of the leading citizens of Gibeah surrounded the house, planning to kill me, and they raped my concubine until she was dead. So I cut her body into 12 pieces and sent the pieces throughout the territory assigned to Israel. For these men have committed a terrible and shameful crime. Now then, all of you, the entire community of Israel, must decide here and now what should be done about this. And all the people rose to their feet in unison and declared, "None of us will return home. No, not even one of us. Instead, this is what we will do to Gibeah. We will draw lots to decide who will attack it. 1/10 of the men from each tribe will be chosen to supply the warriors with food, and the rest of us will take revenge on Gibeah of Benjamin for this shameful thing they have done in Israel." So all the Israelites were completely united, and they gathered together to attack the town. The Israelites sent messengers to the tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What a terrible thing has been done among you. Give up those evil men, those troublemakers from Gibeah, so we can execute them and purge Israel of this evil." But the people of Benjamin would not listen. Instead, they came from their towns and gathered at Gibeah to fight the Israelites. In all, 26,000 of their warriors, armed with swords, arrived in Gibeah to join the 700 elite troops who lived there. Among Benjamin's elite troops, 700 were left handed, and each of them could sling a rock and hit a target within a hair's breadth of or without missing. Israel had 400,000 experienced soldiers armed with swords, not counting Benjamin's warriors. Before the battle, the Israelites went to Bethel and asked God which tribe should go first to attack the people of Benjamin. The Lord answered, "Judah is to go first." So the Israelites left early the next morning and camped near Gibeah. Then they advanced towards Gibeah and attacked the men of Benjamin. But Benjamin's warriors, who were defending the town, came out and killed 22,000 Israelites on the battlefield that day. But the Israelites encouraged each other and took their positions again at the same place they had fought the previous day. For they had gone up to Bethel and wept in the presence of the Lord until evening. They had asked the Lord, "Should we fight against our relatives from Benjamin again?" And the Lord had said, "Go out and fight against them." So the next day, they went out again to fight against the men of Benjamin. But the men of Benjamin killed another 18,000 Israelites, all of whom were experienced with the sword. Then all of the Israelites went up to Bethel and wept in the presence of the Lord and fasted until evening. They also brought burnt offerings and peace offerings to the Lord. The Israelites went up seeking direction from the Lord. In those days, the Ark of the Covenant of God was in Bethel, and Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the grandson of Aaron, was the priest. The Israelites asked the Lord, "Should we fight against our relatives from Benjamin again, or should we stop?" The Lord said, "Go. Tomorrow I will hand them over to you." So the Israelites set up an ambush all around Gibeah. They went out on the third day and took their positions at the same place as before. When when the men of Benjamin came out to attack, they were drawn away from the town. And as they had done before, they began to kill the Israelites. About 30 Israelites died in the open fields and along the roads, one leading to Bethel and the other leading to Gibeah. Then the warriors of Benjamin shouted, "We're defeating them as we did before." But the Israelites had planned in advance to run away so that the men of Benjamin would chase them along the roads and be drawn away from the road. When the main group of Israelite warriors reached Baal Tamar, they turned and took up their positions. Meanwhile, the Israelites hiding in ambush to the west of Gibeah jumped up to fight. There were 10,000 elite Israelite troops who advanced against Gibeah. The fighting was so heavy that Benjamin didn't realize the impending disaster. So the Lord helped Israel defeat Benjamin, and that day the Israelites killed 25,100 of Benjamin's warriors, all of whom were experienced swordsmen. Then the men of Benjamin saw that they were beaten. The Israelites had retreated from Benjamin's warriors in order to give those hiding in ambush more room to maneuver against Gibeah. Then those who were hiding rushed in from all sides and killed everyone in the town. They had arranged to send up a large cloud of smoke from the town as a signal. When the Israelites saw the smoke, they turned and attacked Benjamin's warriors. By that time, Benjamin's warriors had killed about 30 Israelites, and they shouted, "We're defeating them as we did in the first battle." But then the warriors of Benjamin looked behind them and saw the smoke rising in the sky from every part of the town. The men of Israel turned and attacked. At this point, the men of Benjamin became terrified because they realized disaster was close at hand. So they turned around and fled before the Israelites toward the wilderness, but they couldn't escape the battle. And the people who came out of the nearby towns were also killed. The Israelites surrounded the men of Benjamin and chased them relentlessly, finally overtaking them east of Gibeah. That day, 18,000 of Benjamin's strongest warriors died in battle. The survivors fled into the wilderness toward the rock of Rimmon, but Israel killed 5,000 of them along the road. They continued to chase. They continued the chase until they had killed another 2,000 near Gittim. So that day, the tribe of Benjamin lost 25,000 strong warriors armed with swords, leaving only 600 men who escaped to the rock of Rimmon, where they lived for 4 months. The Israelites returned and slaughtered every living thing in all the towns, the people, the livestock, and everything they found. They also burned down all the towns they came to. So we said this a little while back. That when there's situation and circumstance and no external threat, they will turn on each other. That's just the reality of what we are seeing here. That we will see civil war of sorts taking place from within the people of Israel.
Yeah, this is yeah, this and I'm glad you brought that back up because I was thinking it at the time that every time and Phineas is here, the one that stopped the original skirmish that they had very early on. He was a part of that council that kept them from fighting, going into the promised land. But now here, after all said and done, it's like, yeah, we're gonna punish the offenders. We're gonna fight each other, and this infighting is cost them. And I didn't do the math, but we saw 18,000 here, 30,000 here, 25,000 here. These are astronomical numbers that of people
Yeah.
that are falling, and is it really worth it? But they are. This is like you said. This is the infighting. Comes to a head here. Something that jumps out is they're consulting the Lord in if they should fight or not, which is interesting. Because there's a lot of things that people probably can draw from this, like, hey, what's going on here? Well, this is them, bringing justice for, the evil that was done. It was stated very clearly that this was an evil that was done, and that they were seeking justice for it. But this is very bloody battles here. This is something that you would see in movies or something like this. This is epic battles here.
Yeah. So I wanna clear the queue here. We've got some chats. I have a question. Yep, go ahead. Uh, Gio, what's up? Glad you are with us. Um, and Ronan, shalom. Glad you are with us this morning. So, do you believe that anyone that isn't Christian goes to hell? That is a very big question. That is a question that because there's a million depending on what you're looking at. Um, there's a million offshoots and a million different little pieces that you have to consider and comment on when you're looking at the theology of hell and salvation and all of that sort of stuff. So I'll simply say this: I think it's bigger and way more complex than we really can even wrap our mind around. I do think that the whole process has been sold short, that, you need to have some kind of sinner's prayer moment while you are alive and all of that, that it's all very formulaic and it's a very linear path. If you do not have the sinner's prayer moment, then you go, I just think, like I said, I don't I think it's when you're talking about the God of the universe, I think you have to paint in larger strokes than just one specific thing. Yes, the Bible is specific about believing in the name of Christ and all of that sort of stuff. That's not the part that I'm commenting on when I talk about. I think it's more complex than that. I think it's more about we don't know what those moments after the veil look like. What we don't know what like that side of things looks like, and when it comes to the actual like place of hell and all of that, I myself, um I have done a lot of journeying when it comes to where I've specifically landed as far as that goes. And I can tell you that it's not a matter of, oh, I have reached a destination and all of that, because it's not necessarily something that I've like. It's kind of one of those. It's on the list of what I believe and and why do I believe it, sort of questions, and like putting pegs in places, but it's definitely not a close-handed matter by any stretch of the imagination for me.
Yeah, I think I'll stick, with keeping it simple. That it's really not a matter of hell. God's goal is for us to have relationship with Him, and He's
Yep.
given us Christ as the means to doing that. And so, drawing close to the Lord through faith in Jesus is God's desire. The Bible says He's not willing for anyone to perish. So, I would take that off the table. It's used as a scare tactic. Even to bring that up, it's kind of like, it's an interesting thing to bring up. As we're reading through this, you know, I think that the key element here is, what is God's desire? Well, He desires for men to be saved. He's calling you into relationship with Him, and that's what your focus should be. Um, you know, avoiding hell. Like you said, if I say some magic words, I avoid hell. That's not even what we're talking about. That's not even a
Yeah.
thing. The thing is, what is God's desire? Well, He sent His Son that you might be saved. He said He sent His Son into this world not to condemn the world, but that through Him the world might be saved.
Yeah. Not to say that you're necessarily approaching from the perspective of fear-based
Right,
theology and
right.
all of that, but
Yeah,
when your focus is on whether or not people are going to hell, I would say that it's something that you should probably engage God about, the of whether or not there is a fear that you or others would be going, like, that you are doomed to hell, sort of thing. Um the follow-up question is, so do you believe, if you don't believe in Jesus and are a different religion and do believe in God, you don't go to heaven? Um yeah, so I'm gonna say this. Um in this context, at this moment, um I would I would say you are probably going to find our responsibility, or our responses, a bit lacking, because what you're going to keep seeing is, we want to honor the comment section, and we want to honor the chats that are coming through and all of that, but Friday mornings tend to be centered around, let's walk through the Old Testament, at least in this current version of Kingdom on the Road. Now, Tuesday evenings, I have a live stream called Pastor Reacts, and I open the door for Q&As during that time. Within the KFM family, we also have Misfit Outdoors, where Andrew, who's sometimes on this show, will take live questions from the audience that are more theologically and broader based. Because you're getting into, with this topic, you're getting into plurality of religion, you're getting into the reality of what does it mean to believe in Jesus or not believe in Jesus but still believe in God. And it's very much um segmenting out the different aspects where it kind of feels like you're looking for something very, very specific that is going to be very hard for us to drill into in this specific context.
yeah, yeah. I agree. This is a larger conversation, you know,
Yeah.
that needs to be had, and I think,
Yeah.
even outside of that, you could dive into it deeper, on either one of those shows, or even reach out to us personally so we can kind of walk through. Because as you ask these questions, I have questions that I would like to ask you. So, and we we don't have time to really break that down. So,
So, and I want to be clear about something. You didn't ruin the stream. The stream
no,
isn't
no,
ruined. We're going to get back to our regularly scheduled programming here in a minute. Trust me, Ant and I both are experienced enough at this whole thing that we're good. Don't worry about that. You didn't ruin anything. Seriously, like, we mean what we say.
right,
Come back on Tuesday. Like, come back when we're doing the live Q&As, because we love the chance to be able to engage and have these types of conversations. It's just in this specific context, we would have to abandon literally everything else that we're doing this
right,
morning
right,
in order to engage these things. It doesn't mean we don't want you to come back. It doesn't mean that we don't appreciate the engagement or anything else like that. We love it.
mhm,
We just want to be able to really actually be able to honor, and not be like, hey, let's touch on this a little bit, while
right,
also trying to get back to what we're trying to get back to and all of that sort of stuff. Because we appreciate people who wrestle authentically, with big questions and big matters and all of that sort of stuff. And then they said, "I certainly will come back on Tuesday. Thank you very much for letting me know. No problem."
Awesome.
So we did get another comment in the midst of all of that. Ronan said, "The slaughter of Benjamin is what sets up Saul when he says that Benjamin is the smallest, most insignificant tribe." Yeah, the slaughter of Benjamin.
Right. Gotta read that again.
Yeah, Junky's coming in. Give me a second. I'm trying to get back to it. The slaughter of Benjamin is what sets up Saul when he says that Benjamin is the smallest, most insignificant tribe. So I think what they're saying is this is what causes that statement to be true, that they're the smallest and most insignificant tribe.
Uh, yeah, I think that could be possible. Because Saul does end up coming from the Benjamites. And it's
Yeah.
interesting. I would say it's an interesting fact that the Benjamites commit this crime. They are cut down, and then a king, their first official king, um, comes from the Benjamites. So that it's an interesting connection there. The Bible doesn't specifically, say that. You're kind of drawing a conclusion, um, and I don't think it's far off. But as we normally, caution people, is be careful when you're drawing conclusions that's not specifically stated. But I don't think that this one is too far fetched.
Yeah, and that was his argument against becoming king. Okay, yeah, I was trying to
Yeah,
grabbing this with something else, trying to put the pieces together. But yeah, I'm with Ant. Like I don't think you're coloring outside the lines. You know what I mean? Like that's for sure. And as we've said before, um, it's there's always room for kicking the can around. That's one of the beautiful parts of reading scripture. Um, so long as we remember that we're kicking the can around and we keep it in the proper context. Especially this is far from anything that is like theology prime related,
right,
and so it's the Bible hyperlinks in a fascinating amount of ways all
right.
over the place. So, and then repent says it is a good question. It is a good question,
It is.
and that's why we want to honor it in its proper context. Okay. So let's go ahead and wrap up the book of
All
Judges.
right,
We are
here we go,
on
y'all.
chapter 21. I am very happy to get out of this part of town. Um, all right. The Israelites had vowed at Mizpah, "We will never give our daughters in marriage to a man from the tribe of Benjamin." Now the people went to Bethel and sat in the presence of God until evening, weeping loudly and bitterly. "O Lord, God of Israel," they cried out, "why has this happened in Israel? Now one of our tribes is missing from Israel." Early the next morning, the people built an altar and presented their burnt offerings and peace offerings on it. Then they said, "Who among the tribes of Israel did not join us at Mizpah when we held our assembly in the presence of the Lord?" At that time, they had taken a solemn oath in the Lord's presence, vowing that anyone who refused to come would be put to death. The Israelites felt sorry for their brother Benjamin and said, "Today, one of the tribes of Israel has been cut off. How can we find wives for the few who remain, since we have sworn by the Lord not to give them our daughters in marriage?" So they asked, "Who among the tribe of Israel did not join us at Mizpah when we assembled in the presence of the Lord. And they discovered that no one from Jabesh Gilead had attended the assembly. For after they counted all the people, no one from Jabesh Gilead was present. So the assembly sent 12,000 of their best warriors to Jabesh Gilead with orders to kill everyone there, including women and children. This is what you are to do, they said. Completely destroy all the males and every woman who is not a virgin. Among the residents of Jabesh Gilead, they found 400 young virgins who had never slept with a man, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh in the land of Canaan. The Israelite assembly sent a peace delegation to the remaining people of Benjamin who were living at the rock of Ramah. Then the men of Benjamin returned to their homes, and the 400 women of Jabesh Gilead who had been spared were given to them as wives. But there was not enough women for all of them. The people felt sorry for Benjamin because the Lord had made this gap among the tribes of Israel. So the elders of the assembly asked, "How can we find wives for the few who remain, since the women of the tribe of Benjamin are dead? There must be heirs for the survivors so that an entire tribe of Israel is not wiped out. But we cannot give them our own daughters in marriage because we have sworn with a solemn oath that anyone who does this will fall under God's curse." Then they thought of the annual festival held at Shiloh, south of Libnah and north of Bethel, along the east side of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem. They told the men of Benjamin who still needed wives, "Go and hide in the vineyards. When you see the young women of Shiloh come out for their dances, and each of you rush out from the vineyards, and each of you can take one of them home to the land of Benjamin to be your wife. And then their fathers and brothers, and when their fathers and brothers come to us in protest, we will tell them, please be sympathetic. Let them have your daughters. For we didn't find wives for all of them when we destroyed Jabesh Gilead. And you are not guilty of breaking the vow, since you did not actually give your daughters to them in marriage." So the men of Benjamin did as they were told. Each man caught one of the women as she danced in the celebration and carried her off to be his wife. They returned to their own land and they rebuilt their towns and lived with them. Then the people of Israel departed by tribes and families and returned to their own houses. In those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. It's a little late kidnapping, that's all. Okay, so yeah, this is wild, y'all. Like this is
Uh,
so there were points where um we said like what this is. We see the first five, and then we see Joshua, and we see the allocation of the land, and then we see the systematic downward spiral
right.
of the people of God, punctuated by high points. And y'all, it's still gonna get weirder. Like it's still we're not even anywhere close to being out of the weeds yet. Yeah, I just think that again, like if there's any one thing to take out of this, it's that when you look at the dynamic of all of this, This is not a call to look at all of civilization, all of human history as terrible, rotten, disgusting scumbags. It is a picture of left to your own devices. This is what could happen. And that's kind of what is being sometimes things happen in the comment section and it legitimately makes me laugh. Seven brides for seven brothers. Stop. That's hilarious. Oh, that's too much. Uh, um anyway, yeah, you don't want to go too far when looking at the full dynamic of like what does this say about all of human history, but this does but it does bear a question, right? What do we do when we're looking at theology, when we're trying to build out the character of God? We've said this before, right? What's continuous? The nature and character of God. Now, in the midst of nonsense and chaos, we do see that they did consult the Lord on certain things. And to those certain things, he did engage. So, does that mean that he's saying, is it really so segmented that God is saying, you this shouldn't, and none of this is how it should be happening, but because you've consulted me in these spots, this is where I'm going to engage with, or is it a look at, God is backing what they're doing?
Yeah, I think you do bring up that point because it's 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 kind of highlighted here that they consulted God here, even wept before God in another place, but then went out and made their own choice to go do what they were going to do in other places. And their their issue is that there's no direction. There's no, earthly representative to guide them and direct them. So they're doing what's right in their own eyes. Remember that statement that, like you said, Joe, there's certain things that God instructed, but for the most part, the people are doing what is right in their own eyes. That's what we're seeing here. And um, to glean from that is to understand that, they're not consulting God on this. They don't have any consistent direction. They're kind of doing things like, oh, we'll consult God here and then we'll go and we'll do it. And man, it just seems so human, so normal. So, not to this extreme, right? Because this is about Israel, this is about this time, this is about, what was happening in this situation, but even on a level of just daily life, there is this, hey, I'm just going to go and do what I'm going to do, and at the end of the day, we'll figure it out. You guys hear that in the background, they're working on my roof. So now the end of the world is happening over here.
Yeah, so I think, I think this whole situation is messy, and I think part of what we need to be okay with when navigating our way through this portion of scripture is to acknowledge the fact that this is the messiness that took place after Moses and Joshua, and they were in the land and all of that sort of stuff. That nothing more, nothing less.
Right.
That it is human messiness on complete and total display.
Yes, and like you said, man, I'm glad we're leaving this part of town.
Yeah, yeah. All right, you want to go ahead and pray us up?
Yes, yes, yes. Father, we thank you for this time in your word. And Lord, I pray that as we have read through this, that you give us clarity and understanding. You said in all of your gettings to get an understanding. an understanding of what we're reading and what the significance is and how it impacts the rest of the Bible and seeing it in its full context and keeping things within their context so that we can understand what it's foreshadowing, why it's important, why was it necessary to be written. And Lord, I just thank you for the patience, the diligence, and the willingness to engage the scriptures so that we can know more of who you are and what our responsibility is towards you. And so, Lord, I thank you for this time, and I pray that you bless those that watch this now and later. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you all for joining us. We will be back again next week, same place, same time, live, 10 a.m. Eastern. We'll let you do the math from there. Have a great day to you as well, Ronan. Catch you next time. Make sure that you stay tuned throughout the week, especially over on the Twitch channels. There will be programming throughout the week, like we had talked about. We've got Pastor Reacts on Tuesday. We've got Misfits Live, the whole 9 yards. You'll be able to see the full breakdown of our schedule over at kfmbroadcasting.com. If you need prayer, you can go to kfmbroadcasting.com/prayer. There's a form that fills out that you fill out. It goes to the team. We will be praying for you there. Remember, until next time, two very important things: that you are prayed for and you are loved deeply. All right. Peace.